for their livelihoods. But every year, the ocean absorbs 30% of human carbon emissions. We are crossing irreversible tipping points with many communities already living in crisis. Today, more than 1 million plant and animal species are at risk of extinction, as per the 2019 IBPES report. But as global leaders prepare for COP15, what should be the focus area? I am having this conversation with Ken Mwathe, Policy and Communications Coordinator, BirdLife International Africa. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Dennis.
A lot going on. We depend on the plants to take care of us, and the plants depend on us to take care of them. How do we sort out this problem?
It is, and thank you, Dennis, for having me here. It's a global, we're talking about a global crisis where, as you said, more than 1 million species of plants and animals are at the risk of extinction. And this is because of human, driven by human development. Some of our developmental activities like agriculture are responsible for this. Our infrastructural development, how we do our energy and mining poses a threat to these important elements of biodiversity. And without them, then there is no life, basically. There is no food, there is no water. Without bees that pollinates our crops and birds, some types of birds, there is no some of the crops that we depend on for food security cannot grow, and therefore there is a crisis. If this continues, we go as humanity, our existence is at risk. So we need to do something.
Now, when we talk about biodiversity and specifically environmental degradation, we find that there has been a constant conversation and talks about preserving the environment.
Yes.
But as humans, are we picking up the lessons from it and be able to protect our environment? Because it is a symbiotic relationship. Take care of the environment, it takes care of you.
There has been an effort by the global community and for a country like Kenya and other African countries to take up the challenge and do something. In 2010, the global community agreed on targets to address biodiversity loss. Unfortunately, not many of the targets that were agreed on in Nagoya, in Japan, have been achieved by 2020. And therefore you see systems like agriculture continuing to threaten our biodiversity. You find species being driven to extinction by human activities like mining, like I said, and there's basically a need to transform how we do these things. There's need for transformative change, and that's why the global community has once again come together before the 15th meeting of the on biological diversity later this year in Canada, to craft a new framework that is going to change the way we do things. Mm-hmm. If you look at something like agriculture, we create new areas of cultivation by clearing forests, draining our wetlands, using a lot of fertilizers and pesticides that kill our pollinators and our birds, and therefore we must come up with a new way that that ensures that we have a regenerative agriculture that takes care of that sets apart part of the farm for nature. Mm-hmm. Because that is where you get the water, that is why you have your birds, that's why you have your bees that you need for pollination.
Now, before we even get to talking about the COP15 that will happen in Montreal, Canada,
yes,
let's talk about the Paris Agreement. This is an agreement that was there and was seen as the game changer when it comes to protecting the environment. What are some of the achievements thus far? What are these things would say as Kenya or as the world we managed to lower the environmental heat, the degrees have gone down? Have we managed to achieve some, or if any?
I think the global community is doing is doing a commendable job, I would say, to try and reduce our carbon emissions and try to develop systems that help communities to cope. But I think enough is not being done, because if you look at a country like Kenya, every time there is drought, people die from hunger. Livestock die from dehydration and lack of water. Crops fail and people are not able to get food. I think the challenge is to translate international conventions into practical, doable things that matter to the local people. I think that's where the problem is. We need to be able to help our people to be able to adapt to the adverse effects of climate change. Even as we try to develop alternative cooking methods, for example, so that they do not destroy the habitats. So that we're not just we're not just talking about the Paris Agreement. That Paris Agreement means something to an African in Burkina Faso, for example, a Kenyan in Turkana, a Kenyan in Kilifi. Yeah, so we need to bring it down and make it real for the person on the ground.
I mean, even when you're talking about the Paris Agreement and now COP15 that is about to happen and the strategies that are put in place, we find that now with the Ukraine-Russia crisis, there are countries in Europe who decided to ban coal again. So we're making 10 steps forward, but 100 back. How then do we channel this conversation that regardless of what happens, we must always look at biodiversity as something that ought to be protected at any given time?
I think it's commitment, commitment, and more commitment. And I would say that the governments have a big role to play, because they're the ones that commit themselves in these agreements. They're the ones who have signed to lowering the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. I think the war in Ukraine should not be used as an excuse to go backwards. Yeah. Because I think that's what you're seeing. We are seeing a lot of new oil and gas concessions, countries going back to using coal. I think it's a temptation we must resist and continue working towards renewables, and as the aspirations of the Paris Agreement and the parties are trying to agree, work towards having a situation where we have full renewables in use by 2050. It is the only way. Otherwise, if we get beyond 1.5 degrees, then this world is going to be unlivable. We're not going to have local communities are not going to be able to access water. I'm not sure we'll be able to live because of the high temperatures
of the disasters.
Yes.
And now, even when you talk about global warming and Paris agreements and COP15, these things ought to be localized, like you've rightfully said. So we need to look at, when people are talking about gas and oil products, how are we localizing these to a Kenyan in Kwale County, in that village there, to understand that, there are other alternatives that you could use. Say, should the government come up with a policy, say, on the use of biogas, for example, because every home has a latrine? How are we converting that into cooking gas?
I think it's about finding solutions that are appropriate at the local level. For someone who is in Kakamega, that could be something different. It could be using the leaves and maybe part of the soil and something else, and the dung from livestock to sustainably be able to find energy for cooking and energy for other uses. For someone in Garissa, it could be something different. For someone in another African country, it could be the type of a stove that can be for cooking that uses less firewood. So local communities have a role to play, but the government, in its policies, needs to develop policies and create an enabling environment so that civil society organizations can also be able to come in and provide these solutions.
Now let's talk about nature positive. What is nature positive? Because a lot of governments, especially in Africa and East Africa, have signed a pledge towards having a nature positive. What exactly is this?
We are calling for a halt to biodiversity loss by 2030 and begin the journey towards recovery. And nature positive means there's more biodiversity recovering than we are losing. So that is a call that a lot of countries are actually giving, and there's a group of countries which in the UN language are referred to as parties that are saying we want to commit ourselves to reverse, to halt, to reverse, and to work towards nature positivity. And Dennis, I believe it's possible. I think we just need to change our ways. We need to change the way we do our development and look at biodiversity as a goose that lays the golden eggs. So look at biodiversity as the source of food. Look at biodiversity as the source of our energy, the source of our water. Think of a city of Nairobi without the surrounding ecosystems. It will basically not be there because there will be no water, there will be no fuel, there will be no food. This city and many other cities in this continent, Johannesburg, Dakar, and others, they depend on the ecosystem that's around them for food, for water, for everything. So if all governments, if all local communities, if all people looked at biodiversity and the ecosystems from that point of view, then we would invest, we would protect them more, and we would do what it takes to ensure that we protect them.
Very well. Ken Mwathe, Policy and Communications Coordinator, BirdLife International. We are having a conversation when it comes to preservation of biodiversity. He says that there is need for governments to put in place policies that will make sure that we prevent and conserve our biodiversity because, like rightfully put, it is a symbiotic relationship. Take care of your environment, it will take care of you. This conversation definitely must continue at all costs, even as leaders prepare to go for COP15. We call upon them to make sure that this is a conversation that sticks and has solutions at the end of the day. My name is Dennis Aseto. This is Africa Speaks. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. And remember, be cautious about the environment.